Meet Edward. It's 10 p.m., and Edward sits slumped in his home office chair staring at a blank spreadsheet. He can hear his son's laughter echo faintly from the next room, but Edward's mind is elsewhere. Stuck on the conversation he had with his CEO earlier today, especially when he was asked, "What's your plan to turn this team around?" The words still sting. Edward had promised to provide solutions, but deep down, he has no idea what those solutions are. Edward is the CFO of one of the largest insurance companies in the US. A year ago, everything in his life changed. His wife of 15 years left, and the responsibility of raising their son, who has developmental challenges, now rests on Edward alone. At work, his team's performance has been sliding, and despite asking for feedback from his directors on how to improve team performance, he feels as though he has very little to work with. He's frustrated by his team's lack of results, and he's now considering replacing key members of his leadership team. But this week, something shifted. An outside consultant was brought in to provide coaching to the executive team. At first, Edward thought it would be a waste of time, but he decided to go along with it. In his 30-minute one-on-one session, the consultant asked pointed questions focused on Edward. Every time he attempted to steer the conversation towards his team's underperformance, the consultant respectfully but firmly brought it back to him. At first, Edward felt insulted, thinking that she was implying that he was the problem. But as the session progressed, it became clear that she was encouraging him to take more ownership of the situation. The conversation hit him hard, and he's been reflecting on it ever since. He's beginning to realize that his personal struggles, having to care for his son, dealing with the aftermath of divorce, and the balancing of his professional responsibilities have taken a toll on his motivation, his productivity, and his focus. He portrays a confident persona, but behind closed doors, he's wrestling with self-doubt. In his conversations with his directors, he feels like he's been much more reactive than proactive. And while he sees himself as a kind and empathetic leader, he's beginning to question whether that's how his team perceives him. All of this has led to him sitting in his office chair late at night, wondering how he can turn things around. Today, I'll be meeting with elite high-performance coach Julie Hruska to discuss Edward's story. Julie was named Holistic Life Magazine's High Performance Coach of the Year in 2024, and she has a proven track record of helping leaders achieve their highest potential. And I'm excited to learn what Julie would recommend for Edward to be a stronger, more resilient leader, and to help develop his team to perform at the highest level. My name is Jay Abbasi, and welcome to Unstuck. Real people, real stories, real solutions. While the details are changed to protect anonymity, what you just heard is based on a true story of challenges that come up in the real world. And we discuss how to navigate these environments with practical tips to help you get unstuck and build a more fulfilling, impactful, and balanced life and career. Take me back, Julie, to 2010. I've heard you say that you weren't living a life that truly belonged to you. What happened that led to that realization?
In 2010, I went to a brain-based gender differences, that's a mouthful, conference out in Colorado Springs, Colorado. Now, this was, I have to kind of backtrack before that. I was raised in a very conservative family where my job was to get married, have kids, raise my kids. That's just kind of how it was supposed to be. So I did that. I got engaged at 19, married at 20, had my kids young. And then my oldest son was severely dyslexic and he needed to go to a special school to learn to read, a place that was multisensory. And so, because of that, I needed to go back to work. And I had a degree in education, but I'd been out of work raising my kids for about a decade. So, I went back to school to get my master's, and part of it was attending this seminar. So, I went out to Colorado Springs, Colorado, and I had this like epiphany. It was like the wool was pulled off of my eyes, like an asteroid hit me in the head and woke me up. And I realized that I hadn't been living my life. I had been on autopilot. I was, Ethan, Sydney, and Aaron's mom. I was my former husband's wife, but nobody knew who Julie was. In fact, after that conference, I met some people, and Facebook was kind of newer to me anyway. I hadn't joined. And when I went to join Facebook, I didn't even have a picture of myself because I'd always been behind the camera. And so I had this awakening experience that like I needed to come back. Like I'd lost my identity. Like I was just sleepwalking through my life. And when I woke up, I realized that I needed to change pretty much everything. And so that started my own personal development quest, which then turned into me wanting to help other people eventually.
Wow. Well, you have, first of all, by the way, Colorado Springs, Colorado is gorgeous. I've been there a few times. It's so beautiful there.
It happened actually, my like big aha moment. And I know this sounds a little woo woo, but it happened in the Garden of the Gods. I was walking with some of the participants from the conference, and these other people came walking by. And they're like, Julie, and they knew who I was. And, it's really strange because I live in North Carolina, but they knew who I was. And I didn't know who they were because of my participation in this conference. And one of the people that was with me said, at the end of this, no one will remember like the main speaker, the main trainer, but they're going to remember you. And it really hit me like, wow, I have something to offer the world and I haven't been giving it.
Yeah. I've been to Garden of the Gods, by the way. That's a gorgeous place and definitely can lead to or evoke some aha moments just because of the pure beauty of it. You can lose yourself in it. Why I'm curious, why do you feel like you were on autopilot? Well, I guess what was happening back then that made you feel like you couldn't tap into your true self and really express who you were? What was causing that?
Well, I was living life on the terms of my parents. I was living life the way that they raised me to live. And that wasn't necessarily authentic to me. I love my children very much, but I don't believe that you have to give up everything for your kids. I don't believe that you have to give up your passions and your purpose beyond being a mother, which is a wonderful purpose, but I had more to give the world. And when I kind of had that awakening, I also had to face the reality that I had a very unhealthy marriage that I needed to end. And that's a lot. That's a lot coming at you. And as you can imagine, you kind of get in that like frozen mode of like, oh my gosh, like, am I really going to do this? And I didn't have a path. I didn't even know what a coach was. I mean, back then I was like, oh, coaches are for athletic teams. And I understand that there were people out there that have been through similar things or have the strategies and tools that I needed to recreate my life. So I learned the hard way. And I didn't want other people to do that. So that's how I got into my original high performance life coaching. And now it's transitioned more to high performance business coaching just by the demands of the market and the requests that people have come to me for.
Wow. Yeah. Much of your story I can relate to. After I had my my awakening, it was after I lost my father. And then I kind of started to ask these deeper questions about what am I doing? Where am I going? I ended my marriage, and that was, I think, the right decision. And then I made some major changes. So I think that oftentimes those realizations while they could be very painful, they're also what leads to the great outcomes that come later. And one of the things that you tapped into is yoga. Tell me
Yeah.
about your journey with yoga. I'm curious because I was reading that about you, and it was power yoga. So tell me about that
Yes.
journey.
Yes, power yoga. So during that time, I was recognizing the need to take care of myself. And someone introduced me to hot power yoga. And in that, in a room of 105 degrees for 90 minutes, where everything you have within you physically and mentally is called out, you really start to face your resilience and your capabilities. And I found through that physical practice my mental strength. So, power yoga helped me kind of get the strength I needed to leave my unhealthy marriage and to start over. And I actually loved it so much. I wanted to change the world with hot power yoga. And I got into that, teaching yoga, running a yoga studio, and doing health and wellness coaching. And that was kind of the precursor to the high performance coaching. So when I was in that, I realized that people were coming to yoga for a band aid. They were coming there to feel better, to relieve their stress, their anxiety. But there were root causes, there were deeper issues. And I wanted to get to those deeper issues. And that's how I transitioned into high performance coaching and went after and sought out those kind of trainings.
And there is a training that you have talked about. You went out to California, you made a trip, and you attended a conference, or it was an in-person workshop. And you said that it led to, when you came back, this kind of vision that you have as a high performance coach. I wanted to know what you learned there. Like, what was the thing that kind of struck you like, oh, this is the path that I need to go down?
Yes, so it was Brendan Burchard's High Performance Academy. When I started my yoga LLC, I didn't really know how to run a business because my background is in education. And so I was looking online for a course, like how to run your own business. But I kept coming back to this high performance coaching or this high performance academy. And so through that, they talked about clarity, courage, productivity, energy, psychological mastery. I'm like, well, I need this to really be the best person that can run a successful business. But actually, everyone needs this. And so through my own training, through my online course, you got a free ticket to the live in-person event in San Diego. So I went out there and it was life altering. I was like, I need to do this. The world needs this. And so I went to the High Performance Institute's training, became a certified high performance coach, and the rest is history.
Wow. There's something you said there I just want to highlight for everyone listening. You realized first that you need this.
Yeah.
So you did the work on you first before you then went to say the world needs this. Because I think
Yes.
that too often what people fall into is, I want to be in this kind of position and solving these kind of problems, but they forget about that step of you got to do the work on you first.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Leading by example is the way to have the most impact.
Yeah.
And I think that's missing. Before we started recording, we were talking about integrity.
Yeah.
And it's so important to me because to me, you need to have a good understanding of what you're going to help other people with. So if you're not clear about your purpose, how are you going to help others become clear on their purpose? If you aren't being productive in your day to day life, how are you going to help executives be productive? If you haven't mastered your mindset, or at least are on the journey to master your mindset, because it is a journey, then how are you going to help other people do it? And I think that's really important because there's a lot of lack of integrity out there, especially in the coaching world. There are so many people who claim to be coaches, but they don't have their stuff together. We'll do a PG word. They don't have their lives together, right? And
It's true.
so
It's true.
if they don't have their lives together, why would you want to take advice from them?
Yeah.
It's kind of like if you're going to build an empire, do you want to take advice from someone who can't pay their bills? It's that kind of integrity that's really important to have to me. And so for me, yes, I went through it, and then I was like, oh, this is what people need. I was on a quest. I was on this journey to recreate my life. And through that, I started to see what other people need, whether they're recreating their life or just an aspect of their life.
Yeah. Yeah, we were talking before the recording about how I was telling you how I was experiencing a lot of anger today. And I had to work through that, right? I was saying, this is something I coach people on all the time when they're dealing with their disruptive emotions, how to handle it. And just because one is in a position of coaching or speaking or training, it doesn't mean that it doesn't come up for you either. And we
Right.
have to practice what we preach. And the anger I'm experiencing had to do with, I was telling you about contractor not fulfilling his
Mhm.
commitment out of his integrity. And it was frustrating me, but I've done the work today. I had to take some pauses today. I had to do some breathing. I had to write it out a little bit. I had to leave my desk for a while and go out for a walk because it was really bubbling up in me. Now, you
Right.
brought up, go ahead. I'm sorry.
And can you imagine if you weren't able to emotionally regulate and then you got on this podcast and I
Right.
said something that triggered you and then all hell breaks loose, right? Like it's not going to work. And that happens all the time.
Yeah.
I work with executives, typically, really high performing businessmen in C-suite positions, and they will lose. Well, now I'm just going to say it. They'll lose their shit on people.
Yeah.
They will just flip out. And it's like, you need to pause and you need to handle that
Right.
because you're leading this organization. And if they see you acting like that, what precedent is that setting?
Yeah.
I
I had
commend
to,
you for doing the work.
before this podcast recording, I had to like walk around and I was telling myself, shake it off a little bit, and just start moving my body, get that energy flowing, and then leverage that energy in a positive way to bring some passion into the conversation. And you're right. It's not even the interaction there that let's say executive is having. It's all the stuff that happened before that they
Right.
didn't work through, which then gets projected onto the other person unfairly. And it is what creates so often these cultures where people don't feel safe, where they're not performing.
Mhm.
One thing that you said, I have to ask you about, because you said, if I don't have clarity of purpose, then how could I help others to gain that clarity? And you've had this journey from teaching, because you were teaching at some point,
Mhm.
education, to yoga, to high performance coaching, and even business coaching now.
Mhm.
So what do you feel then has been your purpose? What have you gotten clear about with your own purpose?
I have always felt that my purpose was to empower people to be the best version of themselves. And my youngest son actually put it all together to me, for me one day. We were talking about, like kind of what do you want to be when you grow up? And I said, well, I had no idea even what a high performance coach was. And now it's my livelihood and it supports our family. And he said, well, Mom, you've always been a teacher. You're just teaching different things.
Yeah.
And that really hit home for me. I'm like, oh, because I didn't see that kind of invisible string
Right.
that brought everything together, but that really is it. I've always been about empowering people, whether it's elementary school children or yoga students or executives in business. It's all about what are the strategies that you need to go from where you are to where you want to be.
Yeah. What I think too often people struggle with purpose is they're trying to kind of force it out of themselves, or they're trying to find it in things. But what they really need to do is listen. And you were listening to your son. You were listening to your experience. Like it's you were open to it, right? Rather than trying to force it. It's always evident. We just miss it a lot of the time. Sometimes it takes us a little longer to figure it out. But through your experience, you can then identify what is the purpose, what is the throughput, the line of throughput throughout it all. And for you, as you said, it's teaching and empowering people.
Yeah.
And one of the things I heard you say in an interview recently, you use this word a few times, and I love this word, and it is equanimity.
Yes.
You use it a lot, and I love it too. And I wanted
I
you to talk about it. I just figured if this is something that you care about, I wanted to bring it on the show. What does equanimity mean to you? And how do you maintain equanimity throughout your life?
Such a good question, Jay. Um, Equanimity to me is what some people call like a flow state. We have this misperception in our society of work-life balance, right? But the problem with a balancing scale is that you have to take from one side to give to the other to make things work. And I hate that concept. I don't believe that you have to take away from your career to make your relationships work. I don't believe that one area of your life has to suffer. I believe you can have it all, but you have to have this flow. You have to create this equanimity. So to me, it's recognizing that there are times that you're going to have to dedicate more focus to your career. And then there are times that you're going to be dedicating more time to your relationships. And so it's creating that flow of what works for you and your significant other, your family, whoever's in your inner circle. What works best for you? And that's the life. That's the equanimity. That's the balance, so to speak, that really is a game changer for people.
Yeah.
Because to me, if you really want to achieve success, you can't be successful in your career and your relationships are failing, because your relationships will start to pull away from your career success. Or if you're really successful in your career and your relationships are great, but you're like 70 pounds overweight and you can't keep up energetically, you can't go on a hike or a vacation that has a lot of steps with your partner. So now that starts to pull away from what I consider holistic life success. And so equanimity is a really big one for me. And that's something that I think sets me apart from most coaches. A lot of coaches are very singularly focused. So it's, hey, I want to, move from this VP position to CEO. How do I get there? Or I want to, increase my income by 20% in the next year. Help me get there. And that's fine. I'm happy to help people do that. But there's more to it. If all you're seeking is a material thing or a position or a rank in life, you won't be happy. And so the way I see high performance is all around whole functioning.
I like that visual you gave of the work-life balance, where it's like a weight scale. And that is what people think it is. A lot of the times it's compartmentalized in their mind between, I have to leave my life to go to work. I have to leave my work to go to life. And I can't have too much in one. I have to have this kind of balance. And just the mindset alone is quite rigid. And
Right.
what I'm hearing from you, which is, I think, one of the most valuable faculties anyone can develop,
Mm.
is adaptability. To be able
Yes.
to adapt to the demands as they increase and adapt to the ways in which you have to schedule out your time so that all areas of life are being taken care of.
Speaking of which, Jay, remember how I said I rescued this dog during the hurricane?
Yeah.
Well, he has gotten something I have to take away from him. So I'm
Okay.
just going to pause and grab it. He has
Sure.
my he has my winter hat. Look how cute this hat is, by the way. You don't even have to edit that if you don't want to. It's like a super cute winter hat I have. And he found it in the closet. I have this extra closet in my office that has like my winter stuff. And he went in there and found it and was chewing on it. So speaking of, right?
Curious dog. Yeah. Yeah.
That's life, though. Like, my reality is I work from home. I rescued a dog during the hurricane that hit Asheville, and he is a little bit needy. And so I have him in my office with me today, and he's being silly. So, yeah, back to equanimity, though. Like, you have to go with it. Some people would freak out. They'd be screaming at their dog. They'd pause the whole podcast. They'd be like, I can't deal with this right now. I need, whatever. But the
We have
reality
to be
is,
adaptable. We have to be adaptable. I
absolutely.
used to have meetings where I remember years ago, it would be before, this was before everyone went remote. This was before COVID.
Mhm.
And I would have my daughter was young at the time, and she would sometimes jump in on my Zoom meetings that I'd be having with high level leaders at Tesla. And I would get nervous for like, oh no, no, don't come in. And then one time I just said, you know what? I'm not gonna hide this anymore. I
Right.
brought her in. I said, Amelia, I said, come here. Say hi to, I forgot, I think it might have been Brent. I said, say hi to Brent. And he was so kind. Hey, how are you, sweetheart? Then he brought his daughter in. And then like they started talking. It was this awesome moment, that we had. And it was thanks to me just being adaptable to it.
Right.
Yeah.
And being authentic too. We don't live in a vacuum. We have lives. I mean, we had to reschedule this, I think, twice because the hurricane hit and I lost
Yeah.
Wi-Fi and I had no cell service. And, we didn't have power for a week. There was no way to do a podcast, but here we are today and it's working out. And so I think, back to the equanimity part, equanimity, adaptability, all of it, it's creating a a sense of being in our lives, embodying this equanimity, this flow state of, you know what, things are good. This is life. And you can roll with it and you can create a life you love when you take ownership of it.
Yeah. Yeah. How I oftentimes term equanimity or define equanimity is to be okay with whatever happens. As simple as that. It's just to learn how to be
That's
okay
really
with whatever happens. And
good. Mm-hmm.
so I'd love to shift into Edward's story a little bit because I think
Yes.
so much of what we've talked about already is applying to what he's going through, but I want to dive deeper. He's got a
Mm-hmm.
lot going on. So he has a divorce that he's going through. He is responsible for his son who has those developmental challenges, and he's struggling at work. He's underperforming. So he has all these things going on. And maybe I'll just start it this way. How would you start with Edward? Where would you start if you were working with him?
I would start with clarity. I always start with clarity because I believe it's the foundation of all success. So Edward needs to be clear about what's working and what's not working in his life. After that, it would be really important to make sure that Edward takes ownership of the situation. So, what's not working and what part of that do you own? Because so many people get into the blame game. You mentioned he's going through a divorce, right? So now he might be blaming his work performance on his partner leaving. He might be blaming it on his child who needs extra attention. But the reality is, you are always in control of your attitude, your effort, and your actions, no matter what. So, ownership is really huge. So, once you're clear on what's working and what's not working, then you have to take ownership of your actions and your contributions to where you are. And then from there, we create an action plan.
Yeah. I remember a previous conversation you and I had where we were talking about at times you have to challenge your clients in a way where they may not like it.
Yeah.
Right? Like in other words, it's not about being popular, it's not about being liked. At times you are the best thing you could do is to call things out in a way that they don't necessarily want to hear, but they need to hear. And what I think in Edward's story, and I hear it a lot, tell me what you think about this, is he's he was falling into the pattern of playing the role of victim.
Mm-hmm.
He was the victim of the other leaders. His CEO wasn't giving him enough direction. All these other reasons why things weren't going well. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, you can be a victim or you can be a victor in your life, and that's a choice. It's a choice, and that is hard for a lot of people because we do live in a society that is so wrought with blame. Blame politics, blame the news. We blame, blame, blame. And the reality is if you want to be successful in life, you have to take ownership of your actions. You can't control other people. You can't control the situation. You can't always control what's going on in your life, but what you can do is control how you respond. You can control the attitude that you bring, and you can control your actions every single day. And when you take that radical responsibility for your life,
Hmm.
that's when the needle moves.
I like the way you term that, radical responsibility. Radical responsibility for your life. And one of the things that comes up for Edward in this story, and it comes up with a lot of the leaders I encounter and I work with is they have on paper all these accolades. He's high level executive. People on outside are probably like, oh, he's the most confident person in the world. But he himself struggles with self-doubt.
Mhm.
How do you help people? How would you help Edward in this case to be able to work through his own self-doubt?
Yeah, that's a really great question. So, self doubt affects everyone. We talk a lot, and you'll see, the concept of imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
And I believe imposter syndrome is a real thing. A lot of times, it's not just a lack of confidence or doubt. Sometimes your skill set isn't where it needs to be. So, again, going back to clarity, getting real and raw about where you are, what's working and what's not working. If there's doubt in your life, you have to say, where does the doubt come from? Is it a limiting belief that you picked up in childhood? Or is it the fact that you are in a position that you don't have the skills to be in and you need more training? A lot of times I find it's a combination of both. Almost every single person out there has limiting beliefs. I'm actually I'm trained in hypnotherapy and not like the woo woo old school, like follow my pen, but like getting into your subconscious to locate the limiting beliefs that hold you back
Mm,
and then deal with them. Because again, you have to deal with your past before you can move forward in the future. I think we both learned that, like from our divorces.
yeah.
You have to deal with that. And if you don't, it will continue to haunt you. So if he has limiting beliefs around being a victim, it's going to be very hard for him to take ownership of his life and achieve the high levels of success if he is still holding on to the fact that he's a victim. He's a victim of his divorce, he's a victim of life, he's a victim of the CEO, blah, 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 blah. Like, I have a no excuses policy. And you're right, not all my clients like it. I have been, I have learned over the years, but sometimes I don't always do it. I've had grown men like get injured by my delivery. So I have to sometimes say, how are you feeling? Are you up for this? Are you in a mindset to receive some pretty harsh feedback right now?
Yeah.
Because yeah, not everybody can handle it.
Yeah.
And
I
that's my
often
job.
I often will ask that similar approach. I'll ask for permission
Mhm.
before I do it because I know I'm about to. I'm going to
Yeah.
say, there's something I want to share with you right now. You may not like hearing it,
Mhm.
but are you open to receiving it?
Right.
And then they say yes, and then I hit them with the hammer. Right. But
But even when they say yes, sometimes they don't want it. I've had people
yeah, yeah,
quit, like quit on me because were not ready to hear it. Now they come back when they're ready, but it's. I remember the first time it happened, I was like, wow, I didn't realize that the reality check was going to be that shocking to this
mm,
client. I really thought he at least had an inkling that he was doing this. He had a inaccurate self perception, and he did something during our session that was a great example to help him see that he had an inaccurate self perception. And I called him out on it, and he did not like it at all. So with Edward, same thing. Edward has to deal with the past, he has to deal with his victimhood, he has to deal with the fact that his choices have gotten him where he is today. And
yeah.
so if he wants a different life, he's going to have to make different choices. And it's not warm and fluffy. There are coaches out there that are warm and fluffy, and they will get on the phone with you and they'll say, how are you doing on your goals? And they'll pat you on the back and they'll be your cheerleader. And that's great if that's what you want. But for me, it's all about results. So if
Right.
you want results, you have to face the music.
And I appreciate the approach of being honest about whether you don't have the skills yet
Mm.
for something that you feel maybe an imposter about or you feel like you're limited. There was the two sides. The way you described it was limiting beliefs and then actual skill set. And it reminded me of something a mentor once said to me a while ago, and I want to get your thoughts on this. He said, um, when you're thinking, I'm not good enough, right? It might be true,
Right?
but
Yeah.
you are worthy. So he would say,
Yeah.
sure, you're not good enough yet, but you are
Mhm.
worthy.
That's a good addition. That's a really good addition.
Right? Yeah, because you're worthy of being that top performing executive leader. Yes, but you got to be able to know that there are some things you have to work on, whether that's your emotional intelligence, whether there's some aspects of leadership that you have to improve upon. It's not something going to happen on its own. You have
Right.
to put the effort in. You have to put in the energy to be able to work through that. And one of the things that you talk a lot about is resilience, Julianne. I want to just ask you about this because when we were saying before about adaptability and work life balance. But instead of thinking of it that way, it's okay, I got to build up the faculties within me to
Mhm.
handle high demand, to be able to work through Edward, his divorce, and having to
Mhm.
take care of his son and deal with the demands at work. What are some of the tools or strategies or tips that you give your clients on how to be more resilient so they can perform at a high level without burning out?
Another great question, Jay. You have to develop a resilient, results driven mindset. So when you look at that, it's no matter what. So, what are your non negotiables? Why are you doing what you're doing? So, I like to connect with necessity and purpose. For me, necessity has always been a driver because as a single mom of three, I remember when my daughter got into NYU and it was like, okay. And my former husband said, if your mom's crazy enough to let you apply to go there, she can be crazy enough to pay for it. And I was not prepared for that. But I was like, okay, I got this. I'm just going to have to work harder. I'm going to have to work harder. I'm going to have to earn more. And that's just what it is. But that gave me an added purpose, an added why, no matter what. And so, you might have it built in. It might be something like you're working to support your family, or there might be something different. You're working to have a greater impact on the world, whatever it is, you have to connect with your purpose. You have to connect with your necessity. Because if not, life gets hard. It's going to throw you a lot of curveballs. You're going to get hit and you're going to get knocked down. But if you have a reason to get back up again, you're going to have that resilience. So I really focus on helping my clients develop resilience with some mantras, right? Like no matter what, but also the deeper sense of connecting to their why and their necessity.
Yeah, that's powerful. The the research on this is so clear that when we are resilient, when we are able to manage through high demand, it's because we are connected. And you use that word a lot just there. We're connected to something, whether it's connected to purpose, connected to the people that we're working with, the greater vision of an organization, something bigger than ourselves,
Yeah.
then we are more resilient. And so it's interesting, right? Because the contrast of that is disconnection, right?
Right.
And so what happens, and I think it's happening with Edward in the story, I think he's realizing it towards the end because he's kind of coming to like, oh my God, wait, I'm the problem here. It-
Yeah.
it's you're disconnected when you're caught in your own thoughts about yourself and
Mhm.
your own personal things and just like what you want and your own fears and your own limiting beliefs. I guess
Mhm.
talk to me about the contrast there. Like, when people aren't connected, what are they going through?
Well, kind of going back to like my story of my loss of identity, like I was sleepwalking through my life. I was going through the motions, but
Yeah.
I wasn't being intentional. People do that all the time. You see people that wake up in the morning, go to work, do their job, come home, watch TV, go to bed, rinse and repeat. It's like a hamster on a wheel over and over again. And that's disconnection. They're disconnected to their reason for being alive. They're disconnected to purpose. They're doing a job to make money, which will always leave you empty. And so it is about waking them up. It's about
Mm.
snapping them out of it. And I used to have 3 words: awaken, empower, inspire. And those were my 3 words for my company because the awakening is the game changer. You have to wake up to the present moment. You have to wake up to the reality that you are in control of your life, that you control your attitude, your effort, and your actions. If you're not awake to that, if you never have that epiphany, game over. You'll continue to go through the motions, and you'll get to your deathbed one day and you'll look back and you'll have a lot of regrets.
Yeah. So everyone's unique, Julie. So what might work for Edward may not work for another person. What works for you may not work for another person. I still like to always ask, because I get curious. You have to, of course, always do that work to stay connected. And I know I do, because it's easy to fall out of it. You mentioned affirmation, mantra.
Mhm.
What works for you to stay connected? What do you do to make sure that you don't fall out of connection with purpose?
I do wake up in the morning and I remind myself of why I'm doing what I'm doing. So, it's twofold. One, as a single mom of three, first and foremost, is to take care of my family, to provide them with the life that I want them to have, which is rich with opportunities and learning and growth. And then beyond that, it's connecting to my greater purpose, which is to empower people. So my job, whether it's with my clients or on LinkedIn when I'm creating content, is to have a positive impact, an empowering impact on the world. And so when I hit my walls or when I'm exhausted, like I have been recently with the hurricane and all the devastation in Asheville, I have to move beyond that by focusing on my purpose.
Mm.
And then no matter what, that's one of my favorite phrases. Like, what do I need to do today, no matter what? And I have my clients do that a lot with action items. What do you need to do to achieve success today, no matter what? Like if the day ends and you can only do 3 things, what are those 3 things? Do those first. Focus on that high impact.
Yeah. And you're doing it in the morning, like you said,
Mhm.
as a means to set that intention for the day. So
Mhm.
before all of the craziness comes and the emails come in and
Right.
the kids need this or that, you're
Right.
saying I set my mindset at the beginning of the day, and even when disruption comes, you've already connected. It's already
Mhm.
established, and you do
Yeah.
it every day. That's the thing I hope people take away from this is, this is
Yeah.
someone who is a high performance coach, very successful, and she's saying she does this every day herself.
You have to. And I have
Right.
my clients, and I have it on my own phone, which I turned off before this, or I'd show you. But on iPhones, you can label your alarm. So I put labels in. Awaken, empower, inspire was on there for a long time. Bold, fierce, and focused is one of my personal mantras. I like 3 words, 3 action items. Threes are really powerful.
Yeah.
Bold, fierce, and focused is what I have on my phone right now, related to how I want to show up and be with my business.
I love it. I love it. So, one thing I like to ask towards the end of these conversations, I'm going to put you in a little bit of a scenario, and I want you to kind of work through it. It's related to Edward. Okay. So, in that
Okay.
story, Julie, Edward is meeting with a coach. Let's assume now you're that coach.
Mhm.
And you went through that process of asking Edward some questions, and you challenged him the way I know you would. And let's say at first he got a little defensive, but then he started to open up to you. Now, you only have a little bit of time because you have another meeting right after this with another leader. And he asks you right before the end of that meeting, he says, okay, if you were to give me one piece of advice, Julie, what would you tell me? What would you say to him before you ended the meeting? What advice would you give him?
Your success or failure is your responsibility. Take ownership of it. Your attitude, effort, and actions. Go to it and make it happen.
I love it. Julie, thank you so much for taking time out of your day. For anyone listening, you got to see the content Julie's putting out on LinkedIn. That's how you and I connected. You are posting regularly. You have an amazing following there because you are always putting out incredible value. So check out Julie on LinkedIn. It's all going to be in the show description. And also powerfulleaders.com. There's a lot of good information there about the work that you do and coaching and workshops. And if anybody's looking for a high performance coach for themselves as an individual or an executive team, I highly recommend reaching out to Julie. You are fantastic. Julie, thank you again for taking time out of your day and sharing your insights with us.
Thank you, Jay. This was a lot of fun. I appreciate it. I'm happy to interact with you, and I'll have to come back. This is a lot of fun. And thank you, everyone, for listening.
After re-listening to that conversation with Julie, I feel like I can take on the world right now. So inspiring, so motivating. She was amazing. And I'm going to walk you through the 3 insights that I'm pulling from our conversation, as well as 3 actionable takeaways. So the insights. Number 1, if you're not clear on your purpose, how can you help someone else get clear on theirs? If you're not productive, how can you help somebody else be productive? If you're not operating with a healthy mindset, how can you help somebody else to establish that mindset? So make sure you're in your integrity. And this is for you as a leader, as a coach, as a parent, as a friend, whatever it is. Be in your integrity. Do the work on you before you look to help others. Number 2, the insight is equanimity. She described it as being in a flow state, being adaptable, and recognizing that there is no such thing as having, or it's not a smart way to approach this by thinking about work-life balance as a scale. Instead, there are going to be seasons where you have to focus more time and energy on your work, and seasons where you're going to have to focus more time and energy on your relationships or whatever it is. But what you're looking to do is create what she called holistic life success. And that means learning how to go with it. Number 3 insight, third insight. You can be a victim or a victor. I love that. So often, people fall into the pattern of victim. You're not even aware that you're doing it. So be mindful of that. Don't play the role of victim. Instead, be the victor. Actionable takeaways. Here they are. Number 1, start with clarity. When I asked her how she would start with Edward, it would be to start with clarity. Take inventory. What's working? What's not? And in that, take radical responsibility for what's within your control in regards to what's not working, what is working. And she said it a few times. You control your attitude, your effort, and your actions. So be sure that you create an action plan according to where you're applying the adjustments and tweaks you can make in those 3 areas. Second actionable takeaway. We have limiting beliefs and skills that could be holding us back. So what we need to do is to be able to address any of the limiting beliefs, but at the same time, learn what skills we need to develop. Take honest inventory of them. As I said in the conversation, a mentor once said to me, you may not be good enough. That may be true. You are worthy, but you may not be good enough. So there may be some upskilling you need to do here to be a better leader, to be a better communicator, whatever it is. Action item number 3. Make a daily commitment to connecting to your necessity and your purpose. She used the example of no matter what. What am I going to do today no matter what? Because of the impact it has on my family, because of my connection to purpose. And make this something that you establish as part of your routine every single day. Join us on Friday's episode. We're going to be going through 3 things together. 1, I'm going to be telling you the story of the Chinese farmer. Some would say it's a Taoist story. Some say it's a Buddhist story. Alan Watts talked about this, used this story quite a bit. I love it. I think that you will learn a great deal about equanimity and the value of equanimity through this story. The second thing I'm going to give you is a formal practice to be able to tap into equanimity. And the third thing is I'll give you a practice that you can use throughout the day to interrupt the patterns that you may be falling into to help you to stay in that state of equanimity. And remember, these Friday episodes, they're not on YouTube. They will be, of course, on any of the platforms that you use when listening to podcasts. Until next time, thank you so much for listening.